Join me as I take on the challenge of creating a lovely winter scene. I used a little bit of AI art for some inspiration. Want to know how I got this far? Well, let's rewind the clock. Hello, welcome back to the studio. As you see, this week I've tackled a snow scene. I wanted to put a really good old solid chunky tree in there, but I also wanted to use a little bit of AI art for inspiration. Now, I'm no expert, but in time I think I could find this a very useful tool. So, sit tight, let's get on with the painting. So here's my canvas, and it's by same old 16 by 20, and it's, yes, a piece of paper that's bought from a decorating shop, and I covered it with some grey gesso. You'll have spotted I put a couple of pins in, one this side and one the other. So this is a little lower than halfway, so the majority is distant sky, and then I got a good chunk of foreground, but just under halfway. Let's mix up some colour. Well, I want to mix up a lavender sort of colour, so I've got two blue and a red colour here, so it doesn't really matter. I've gone for sort of a pastel blue colour. This is cobalt blue, and this is a Susan Shibi colour I've had for simply years. This is cad red light, but a pastel blue and a nice red colour will work fine. And I got my little plastic plate out, and I put some of the grey acrylic in the centre there, grey gesso in the centre there, and I'm going to sort of blend these together to sort of get a nice lavender colour. So let's do that next. I'm just using a cheap little foam brush from the DIY store for this stage. That's all you need, nothing special. I like a little variety, so I might mix in a little more grey here and there. I think that looks rather nice. Maybe the red's a little bit too strong actually. I think I prefer this slightly more bluey colour. The next stage in my painting, I want to create some depth and distance, so again I'm going to carry on my little foam brush here, and I'm going to mix up a very pale grey colour, just a hint of blue. Things that tend to be pale and blue in colour automatically have depth and distance. If you add warm colours into them, they appear to be much closer. So I'm going to just go for a slightly darker version of the grey gesso colour, and I want some very, very distant hills, and they're not going to be too big. I've got some other ideas to drop in as well. So there we go. As I say, I want to give the impression that there's maybe some nice distant forest back there. So I'm going to turn my little foam brush on its edge. Maybe I'll put in the indication. There we go, that's a bit better. Now I can paint and you can see what I'm doing. And so I'm just using this little foam brush to put in the indication of lots of distant fir trees. Lots of variations in colour. Some of these ones look like they're way back in the distance. On the corner of my brush, just do a little touch. See if I can do something. Look, got a bit of red on that one. I think that's going to work just lovely. I can drop a little darker shadow in there. But there we are. That's my background completed. Took me just what? How long did that take me? According to the computer, it says 4 minutes 19. So maybe give yourself 10 minutes to do this. So I've left my canvas to dry for a good half an hour. As you can see, this is now totally dry, so my acrylic is no longer wet and ready to accept some oil paint. Now I have a couple of ways I could tackle this painting. I could start with some of this Bob Ross liquid clear and use it over the entire canvas. And for my sky, I could add some titanium white over that. So I got a sort of nice milky white background, a bit like liquid white. And I could use the foreground just in liquid clear. Or I could start with some liquid white and just use that in the sky only. But of course, then I'd have to use liquid clear in the lower half anyway. So if you haven't got this product, and you've only got, say, maybe linseed oil, this is a way you could maybe use linseed oil for a clear coat and add titanium white to it. So that's what I'm going to do. Liquid clear, and then I'm going to use some titanium white to make a nice pastel sky. For ease of use, I keep my liquid clear in this little airtight container. I leave this sitting in the freezer. what it does is it just sort of preserves the liquid clear, and it makes sure that it doesn't really skin over too much. Just let it warm up for a few moments and it goes back to being this nice sort of runny honey consistency. I'm going to use an old Bob Ross 1-inch landscape brush. I'm going to take just a small amount. It's still a bit on the cool side. You can see it's a bit gloopy. And I'm going to put a very small amount of this on my canvas. Now, if you're going to be painting over, say, maybe more than one day, you might want to just do the sky. Just do it down to just above those hills first. You might just decide you want to do the whole thing in one session and cover the whole canvas in liquid clear. I'm just going to take mine down to the top of those hills this time. I want just the smallest amount on the canvas, barely any. And then over the top of this, I'm going to add some titanium white. There we are. It's had a very thin coat of liquid clear right down to the point where those pins are. I'm going to apply some titanium white to it now. I'm going to use that brush. I'm not going to bother drying it. Take a tiny drop of titanium white. I'm going to scrub that on to my canvas. Now, some of you might be wondering, why bother with the liquid clear? Or even use a linseed oil? Why don't you just go and use some titanium white paint? And you could, but you wouldn't be able to scrub it on nice and thin like this. You'll probably be still stuck here with a ball of titanium white paint, really struggling to get it to move. It's the reason why Bob came up with the idea of a liquid clear paint that you could apply first and then you could use to blend colour on top of. In this case, I'm just blending titanium white into it as a substitute for liquid white. You also see the value of using a grey canvas. When I apply something like a liquid white or titanium white, or my version of them, you can see exactly where you've been. On a pure white canvas, none of this would be very obvious. If you want to test your canvas, simply touch your fingers to the painting and have a look at your fingertips. You want some nice clear fingerprints, but not too overly filled. If they look really filled in, then you've got a bit too much liquid white or titanium white and liquid clear on the canvas. I think I'm about right. Some of the inspiration for this painting comes from a Bob Ross classic, Sunset Aglow. I absolutely adore that sky. Rhubarb and custard reminds me of. So I want to use these colours on my own painting, especially this lovely bright golden yellow colour. So that's where I'm going to start. I want to use this brush again. Problem is, it's full of liquid clear and titanium white paint. So I need to dry clean it on a paper towel. That's it. That should be ready for applying colour. So here's my palette again. My first colour is going to be cadmium yellow. Quite an opaque colour, but quite cool. I want to take this first on my old 1-inch brush that I just dry cleaned. And I want to think about some light breaking over the horizon. So I'm going to start off with just some nice flat strokes here. I'm not going to bother dry cleaning my brush because I'm going to go straight into Indian yellow. And this is a super lovely warm colour. It likes cad yellow. It makes the Indian yellow a little bit more opaque. In other words, a little bit less transparent and see-through. There's titanium white on my painting, so this colour won't go too see-through anyway. But it adds a sense of warmth to my painting, which I absolutely love. Remember, we don't want to lose all of that cadmium yellow. And again, I'm thinking like a long, thin shape. That's going to be the theme for my sky, I think. A bit of an angle to it, and a long, thin shape. Straight into some yellow ochre. Same dirty brush, just a little yellow ochre. Again, this is a very warm, very opaque colour. And it likes Indian yellow and it likes cadmium yellow. See how that manages to bring that forwards, just by adding a darker colour. The next step is to introduce some of these warmer colours here. Some alizarin crimson to start with. Now, this is a little bit more juicy. In other words, there's a little bit more oil in this than I wanted. So it might flood my brush a little bit. And sometimes this happens, you see, just sort of well, it just takes over the whole brush, just floods with colour. It's not quite what I wanted. So just to play it safe, I'm simply going to knock some off on a piece of paper towel. I just want to get in some warm colours here on the horizon line. Keep this under control because it tends to want to run away with you. I think you might try rubbing a little bit of bright red into it. It's kind of give me slightly more of a peachy pink colour. I think I might throw a little bit of Indian yellow in here. I go to the orange side of it a little bit, but see, it just warms it up. And you might notice that using sometimes these old brushes as I'm doing, I think they can get a little bit sort of streaky, which is sometimes a nice effect, but if you don't want that, then you need to really brush slightly more across an angle. And that'll knock off those streaks. Just a slight angle. But there are times when some of those little streaks are actually really welcome. I'll put you back. To make lavender, I need some crimson and a tiny drop of phthalo blue. So I'm actually going to pick up all of the alizarin crimson and take a little bit of phthalo blue into it. And this needs to be mixed thoroughly. And there you see, after I flip my colours and mix them several times, I'm starting to get a nice lavender colour. But it's very strong, really strong. So I'm actually going to put some down there and add some white into it. Oops, I'll get it on the camera in a minute so you can see what I'm doing. But I'm adding some white to it because otherwise it'll be just too powerful. Mix some white into it. I'll put some there. We'll bring it across. I want a sort of soft lavender colour. There you go. It's the sort of thing I want. I switched to a nice clean dry brush because the other brush, well, it's done a lot of work. It's got a lot of yellows and reds in it. So I'm going to just put some of this soft pastel lavender colour on my brush and give it a little tap. Drive some into the bristle tips. As I said, I just want to introduce a little suggestion of this now. Again, I haven't lost my hills completely. I can still get them back. I can scrape the paint off, but this colour here, soft and pastel. I want to just have some of this coming into the edge of my sky as well. Isn't a great deal of blue in this mixture, so I should be fairly safe to go over that yellow without getting green. Quick dry clean of the brush. Off any surplus paint. Gently, side of the brush. Just stroke it gently. There. Let's add lavender, maybe more crimson, and maybe some Prussian blue at the very top. Finally, a tiny touch of Prussian blue. Now, this is a very cool blue colour. Don't need much. I've only got a little bit of sky left to cover. I'll work that into my brush. A nice bluish tint. Just this extreme corner where sky. Having I stand back from my painting and look at it from the other side of the room, and I really love the colour combinations here, the lavenders and the reds and the blues all getting together. I think this yellow patch is a little on the big side though. I've been keeping it from being lost, but I think I've gone too far the other way, and I really want to sort of shrink it down a little bit. A few little streaky clouds across there. Too orangey? I think it might be. What I've done here is I've taken a little tiny drop of crimson, some Indian yellow and a dash of white. And I've made this sort of nice peachy pink colour. It's one of my favourite lovely soft peachy pink tones. So that's alizarin crimson, Indian yellow and white. If something doesn't go in though, if it doesn't really want to disappear, there is a little trick though. I'm going to show you how to get rid of that. If you haven't got one, get one of these. It's called a clay shaper. They're actually used for, well, shaping clay. They're made of rubber. They're like a little squeegee. If you've got something on your painting which really kind of grabs your eye, it's just like a window squeegee. You can just literally remove nearly all of it. It saves you having to work over and over and over a bit of your painting, which is really getting out of hand. There you go. I've wiped away nearly all of that colour. I'm back in with a little bit of the colour that I do want. Just that nice sort of luminousy pink colour. And tap that in over the top. And that orange colour that was causing a lot of trouble, that's gone. Through here as well. I leave a little bit of my sky. I'm going to have some sunshine through here. So I need to cover all of that up. Now, I'm pleased with my sky. It's got lots of great colours in it, but if you wanted to go more, you could maybe change brushes and go for maybe a filbert or a fan brush, and you can come back in here and add lots more little details to it. And so you can use either one of these, or if you've got them, maybe some of these little flat brushes are quite useful. Just little bristle brushes, but fans, filberts, little flat brushes, whatever you've got to hand, use those. But I'm actually going to use one of these next, because I actually want to put a bright spot of sunshine in my sky. Now, let's say a small flat brush can be very, very useful. You get a little tiny touch of white. I want this colour to be quite intense, but not pure white. White with a hint of cad yellow is actually more intense than just, well, plain white on its own. Now, right in here is where I'm going to put this little bright spot. A little tiny bit left of centre, not far, but just a little left of centre. And of course there's cad yellow there already, so this colour should pick up on it. Now, again, stay up in this sort of central area here in the yellow. Put a little dab of colour there. Make sure you're happy with the position. I'm going to have a tree coming through here with some overhanging branches, so if you think it's going to be too far left, then you can always move it to the right a little bit, and that's easy enough to do. There, we can just rub it out. You want to move it over just half an inch, and that might be all the difference between getting it really on the right spot and not. Now, sit your brush in there and just tap. You want quite a nice intense spot of light. Don't let it spread too big. I'm just going to give my brush a bit of a wipe off, so I've knocked off some of that colour. I'm just going to spread this out along the horizon a little bit. I'm staying quite small with this. There we go. Now the reason why I'm staying a bit small is because I might want to come back and add another intense spot of light, but this just can grow really massive if you're not careful. So I'm just going to sort of tap it in a little bit. Now I'm going to knock off the excess paint, because there's quite a lot of paint just there. I'm going to just blend this into my background sky. The last little bit of paint off my brush, just gently feather this out. You might decide that that's as bright as it needs to be, but I still have the option of going bright if I need to. You can also add some brighter colours up here as well. If you think, well, maybe you want to put a bit of underlighting under a cloud maybe. You might decide you want to just add a little bit of sparkle here and there. So you can kind of create these lovely sort of cloudy effects in your sky. So I'm going to have a tree in here, so I'm not going to worry too much about this area. But I think that's it for my sky so far. So once you're happy with your sky, we just have to find a little distant hillside again. And for this, I'm going to use one of my favourites, which is these little cotton buds. And literally just go across and clean off some of the paint. But you don't have to be too perfect with this. So there we have a really lovely, colourful sky scene. And of course, that little wipeout tour wasn't that a success for taking away something on a painting. I highly recommend you get yourself one or two of these things. They're so useful for fixing those, well, happy accidents. But it's time I move on with my painting. Don't forget, this bit is still completely dry. So let's start off by putting some liquid clear on that. Now, I want this to have a real sort of sense of depth and colour, which is a challenge. When people see snow scenes, they think, right, this all needs to be white. Problem is, again, once you've used white, well, you've run out of options really. So this is going to be actually far more coloured. I want to use this lavender tone that I put on here and the lavender shadow colours under here to tone my canvas. So let's put on some titanium white paint, and I think I might try using, well, let's try something small, maybe a fan brush or filbert brush. Let's go with that first. And much of my snow is going to be a lavender colour, because there's quite a lot of lavender in the sky. I will put little accents of yellow in here and there as well. So I've got two of these fan brush filbert brushes on. I'll get the right brush in a minute. I got two filbert brushes on the go. And I'm putting this on pretty thin. And you can see by doing that, some of that lavender colour comes through. This way of layering one paint over another helps me create depth and distance in my work. Once again, I want to keep in mind we have something that's going to be coming through here in a minute. So a lot of what I'm doing here is what I call filler. It's just sort of got to be in there, can't not have it, just in case there's a gap. I think I'm still on my first little bit of white. You'd be right, I have. And I haven't even turned the brush over yet. If I turn it over, look at that. A lot of strong colour coming through here still. Let's say, I want to just really make this the kind of like a light path. I've talked about these before. Something that takes your eye from the distance to the foreground and a feature here. So everything to the left and right, we want to be subtly darker. So I'm going to just take in some of these nice lavender tones in here. This is going to be sort of a shadow in here. These little snow scenes are quite ticklish little things. You can overdo it so easily. Just soften that up a little bit. And this is why I think snow scenes are so fun to paint, but also some tricky little scenes. It's so easy just to throw a load of colour up there, stand back and decide you don't like it. So I tend to paint my snow scenes very slowly. Mention that I want it to be a nice area here. I want to put some foliage here. Let's do something. Let's do something a little bit mad here. You see, because whilst you can't see it on the canvas and it's still in your mind's eye, it's sometimes a good idea to do this. to kind of where you want a feature, do something like it, block it in, put in something there so you can sort of figure out where the rest of it's all going to sit. Well, that all got a bit dramatic suddenly, didn't it? 1 minute it's all sort of nice and calm and sort of like, serene, and me just sort of fiddling around with a little bit of colour, and then suddenly I have a complete sort of fit and throw in a load of dark purples and blues and just scrub on some colour. But what a dramatic improvement, I think, in the overall composition. You see, what was happening there, you see, is I was so busy sort of fiddling around in the background here, not really making a proper decision on the composition or I'm just really just tentatively just sort of prodding at it. And sometimes, we are kind of fearful of doing something that we might just think, oh no, it's a total mistake. But you do have to have the courage for your convictions sometimes to look at what you're doing and think to yourself, something, if I don't put some colour in here in a minute, this is going to die a death of being dreary. And we've got lovely lavender tones up in the sky here, stunning lavender tones. And I want that colour down here. This blue-grey colour here, a bit of a dead duck. Okay, so I made a decision. I went more purple with it. Through here's my light trail. But of course now these trees look, well, quite frankly, they're not really fitting in very well with the painting. Not even sure I particularly like this background hill anymore. It looks a little bit kind of, well, not quite nothing really, does it? So I might just touch this up with a little bit of a highlight. And once again, this painting's evolving as I paint it. This is why I hope you're looking at this with some interest and realising that not everything goes exactly as planned. I do have a plan for this painting, it's in my head. I will sort of show you some of the ideas which I came up with using AI to sort of design something, and then I have adapted it. So let's have a look and see some of the bits of information which I pulled together to make this scene. Hopefully through the magic of video editing, popping up next will be some nice photographs of AI art. That's right, you heard me right. I used AI to sort of compose a scene for me, and I sort of took elements from it and I decided to sort of push them together. So really what I'm doing here is I'm sort of shortcutting the process of creating a piece of art by just working on a sketch first and then sort of working on the colour scenes afterwards. As you see, I'm just sort of flipping through a few of the images. I think I've got about 6 or 7 ideas. So if you're not particularly good at planning a painting or finding your own references, but you have access to a computer, maybe AI art gives you a little bit of an advantage when it comes to designing your own paintings. I think I'm doing quite good with this one so far, but I really do need to do something with that background. Maybe the hills and maybe these trees, as I just mentioned, they look a little bit lackluster. Now I put this lovely foreground in. So let's have a little tinker and a little play and see what we can do with things here, and see if we can sort of just bring things up a little bit. On with the fun. AI art, who would have thought? Let's fix this distant hillside here. So it looks a bit sort of miserable, a bit washed out. I've got my purple filter brush here, so I'm going to go for a very sort of soft pastel blue colour here, maybe for the distant kind of colour. I'm just sort of playing around with a couple of colours here, and I think I know where the sun's coming from. It's coming from sort of directly overhead, so maybe I'll just sort of colour these in a little bit here. Again, just adding this sort of suggestion of colour here, maybe a little bit of snow. Maybe we want to put a little bit of yellow on here as well, but I'm going to start off by just sort of dropping in just maybe over a few little snowy highlights. Nothing special. Now, as I said, I've got a clean filbert brush here, which I'm going to put on maybe a touch of yellowish sort of colour here. So I'm going to use a little bit of white. I've got some little orangey yellow colours here. Whoops, I need to put out a little bit more of that Indian yellow colour. Let's just go for a touch of this. So I've got white with just a hint of yellow ochre in it. Maybe we'll just put a little touch of something back in there. little bit careful there because I've got a lot of blue. Well, I've got some blue back in there, so maybe I'll just work some of this in between the blue colours.
I think I spent about 10 or 15 minutes just playing with those background hills, cautious all the time of getting a green patch. It wouldn't have done.
So I've got a fan brush, a little bit of lavender with some white mixed in with it. I want it to be sort of fairly strong colour. I want it to be sort of slightly stronger than what's happening here maybe. So let's have a dabble. Now, can I just put my brush against the canvas there and looked a little bit on the dark side. So just added a touch more white into it. Just to put in a few nice little trees back in here.
These are just miniature versions of some of those Bob Ross classic fir trees you've seen me paint on other videos. If you want to get a better look at them, check out some of the other sort of foresty scenes I've painted in previous videos.
What you see here, by adding some darker colours into here, I brought this all forwards a little bit, so this has pushed my hill a lot further back. So now I can probably bring in some snowy effects under here. Now I've got a nice dark shadow colour to work off of, so let's put in some highlights on some snow. I switch back to my filbert brush with some lavender tones on it here. I think I'm just going to tap in a little bit of texture here. Pinkish colour. These are all the same colours I had in my sky. And here I want to think about bringing that light trail in. So I've got a nice amount on my brush here now. Just coming in between these trees here. Just going to touch that snow. I just want to get that real pop of highlight. These trees. Now remember, this is textured here, so it's not just flat snow. Just touch this in. Again, I'm going to be bringing up some nice stems and stalks and maybe a little bit more of a bushy effect over in here. So I'm not too worried about it. Same in here. I'm not too worried about what I see here. And I do want to bring in a nice tree through here. So let's add a little bit more detail to my painting. And then we'll move on to the main feature. So you see how my painting is once again transformed. Changing a few details in the background. Starting the light trail. Adding a little touch of colour to some of those little sort of ferny bushes in the mid and foreground. My painting starts to come alive. So you should never really quit on a painting, even if sometimes, well, it looks a little bit like it's a dead dull. Sometimes just adding that little pop of colour really inspires you to carry on going. But I'm at one of those sort of junctions in my painting. I have to ask myself, what would Bob do? What would you do? What should I do? I have an idea. Okay, folks, it's the bravery test, and I want a big old birch tree right here. Notice it's going to be on my third line. It's going to start somewhere down in here. It's going to go right up through about there. And this was to be a big, gnarly old tree. I don't want some little sapling. I want a real big, good-sized tree. So I've got my little filbert brush. This is the one I was using with the blues and the purples on, and I'm going to go into some black, some Van Dyke brown, and just brush mix those two. And I want you to notice I'm putting on a good amount of paint. My black had actually started to skin over already. So now you saw that I kind of scratched a little mark on my canvas. And this is always a good idea if you're ever not sure, just to kind of make a scratch. I don't know if you can see that on camera, hopefully you can, but kind of get a feel for the size and feel of your big features like this big old tree. I don't want to crowd my sunlight too much, but I kind of want it to come through here. I want this to be a nice big tree, so I'm not going to be too mean with it. I'm going to go Well, I was just saying, go big or go home. Well, I can't go home. I'm already home, so definitely gonna go big. Okay, but I do want to get this on here because I want this to sit overnight, at least overnight, so that a lot of this really good heavy chunky paint I just put on has a chance to sort of firm up a little bit. I like to highlight my trees if I have a choice. I like the sort of the underpainting part, this bit, to be kind of sit for at least 7 or 8 hours overnight and to firm up a little bit, but I still want lots of texture, and I hope you can see that. I put this on here, I put it on good and heavy with a lot of texture, because it means that then when I want to make other things stick, and just like that, it's the next day. And if I touch my tree, it's just still tacky. My background has dried almost completely. This paint was applied very thinly and scrubbed in, so I think what I'm going to do is just attack these little bushes and some detail here behind the main tree, and then I'll paint that next. So I've got my palette back out. Some of the paint's a little on the tacky side. I might refresh some of my white and just mix up a couple of nice colours again, but yeah, basically I just cleaned up my palette and left it overnight. So I want to keep much of this area of my painting, these bushes, sort of like in silhouette, because I want the light to look like it's coming sort of from the distance, and it's just catching and highlighting the top of some of these bushes. So I'm going to actually have quite a lot of shadow down in here. I don't want to overdo it with those highlights. As I said, I've mixed up 2 or 3. It's a little bit of cad yellow, Indian yellow and white, touch of the crimson, and maybe a touch of red. So I've got a little variety of colours here, but I think I'm going to start with the brightest one, which is white with a little touch of Indian yellow. Once again, on a filbert brush. Now, if you want to switch out brushes and pick up something else to try with, absolutely fine. You can use it, obviously, just a little liner brush to have a go with, or maybe you want to have a go with one of those little special seascape brushes I made. Let me show you one of those. Let me just quickly pull one out. Where are you? There you are. And if you haven't seen how I make these brushes, what I do is I take an old fan brush and I just trim them down and turn them into these lovely sort of pointy brushes. I might have a go at one of those as well. These are perfect for painting little touches of foliage on bushes and trees, but let's have a go with the old filbert brush again. So remember, the light's coming strongly from behind, and I'm just going to touch the tops of some of these little bushes, little suggestions of snow. See how this works for us. That's it. If I don't like the finished result, I can always take it off and try again.
If you enjoy my tutorial, don't forget, like and subscribe. And when you subscribe, don't forget, ring the little bell icon. That way you get a little notification when I do a new video. Thank you. As you see, I decided to switch to one of my new design brushes. It's one of my old fan brushes I managed to chop into a rather interesting shape. I did a video all about making your own sponges and brushes in another video, and I'll drop a link to it down in the description below. Give it a watch. You'll be surprised what you can do with those little brushes. They're rather beautiful. Right, time to put in some shadow at the base of these bushes, but I'm not quite sure how this is all going to work out. So get your thinking caps on. Maybe this needs to be changed.
Next one adds some nice frozen grasses, and for this I'm going to use a Bob Ross liner brush. Now, Bob would use some thinners to do it. I prefer to use linseed oil. I just find I can get a slightly nicer blend with this, but you use whatever you have to hand. And I simply want to add maybe a drop or 2 to my palette. Just touch and do some nice little upward flicks. Create some nice little stems and stalks. Yeah, look at that. Now they show.
Well, as I add all these little grasses, can you see a problem starting to emerge? Yeah, the more I look at it, the flatter it looks. There's no depth, no definition. It's all the same tone as the background. Need to make some changes. Let's put back some shadows. Once again, having a bit more sort of courage with our painting has paid dividends. I pushed back a lovely deep shadow colour, and it really helped to draw my eye to the corner of the canvas. Now, let's add some snowy highlights. This time I'm going to use some pale blue-grey colours for this shadowy area. I want to make sure I just tuck these up under those bushes. Try and get a little bit of texture into it. Don't lose the little tree roots either. Keep thinking about the lay of the land. How does the ground fall away from the base of the tree? Doing a little bit of time lapse with this because, well, my camera had a tea break, of course. It keeps catching me out.
I've got my other fill brush with some yellows on it. A touch more white, so it's a little bit brighter colour here. Again, it's a little brighter than what's going on in the background. And don't forget you got some yellows and some blues getting together here, so you got the potential for a little bit of a green party going on. So you just got to flick this in and don't work it too hard, folks. Again, nothing too bright at the side here. Here's my focal point. I'm picking up blues as I go, so I have to wipe that off. And so if I need to come back in here and do a little sparkler, do that while there's touch of yellow, Indian yellow and white. I really am flirting with danger here, folks, so I'm going to just stop this little bit. I'm going to start working in the shadows, and if I need to come back and fiddle with that a little more, I can do, but I know that if I go with this colour, I'm going to end up in a pickle. So you saw in that last little sequence how my very flat looking foliage just needed something extra. It needed a boost of shadow colour. It needed a little more contrast. And this is something I think we sometimes, again, we fear that we're going to just overdo it. We're going to put in too much dark shadow. But as you saw, as soon as I started adding those darks, everything fell into place a little more. We have to sometimes be a little courageous when we paint. We mustn't be frightened of our paintings. And if it goes wrong, well, nothing's really lost. The only thing you do lose is if you don't really try, or if you don't have a go at these things, then it really is a complete loss. But sometimes you do have to sort of just, well, stick a bit of dark in there and see if you can really increase the contrast. When you do it, you'll be surprised at just how lovely your paintings come back. And I think I'm now well on the way to finishing off my painting. I've just got this lovely silver birch to put in, maybe just a few more hints of highlight. And I might just add a few more sparklers on there. But that's for another day, maybe tomorrow. Let's press on. So on this silver birch tree, we have to obviously bear in mind that the exact opposite side of the tree, in other words, the part of the tree furthest from light, is going to be in the darkest of shadows in here. So all of this back in here wants to be a very dark blue-grey colour again. And I'm going to add maybe a little touch of a sparkler just on this edge here, maybe even just a touch of snow in here. But the first step is to go for some nice blue-greys. And all I did here is I just gathered up some of my dirty purples, my blues and greys, and a whole bunch of little colours in here. I don't just want one flat colour, so I'm going to use my marble mixed paint and pick up some of that blue-grey colour, little purple, all sorts of things into it. Now remember, silver birches, they have these lovely textured barks, and I'm going to just touch and drag across and try and get some texture on my painting. Down at the base I'm going to keep it darkest, so I think probably I'm going to start maybe about halfway up and see what happens. That looks a little bit too blue, doesn't it? Whoa, too strong, too blue. Okay, go with a slightly lighter blue colour. Okay. Not all is lost if we put on too much of this colour and you think, well, it's too blue or it's too light. We have got the option of coming back and putting on some different colours. We can always come back and put in some dark again. So it doesn't matter if you get this a little too bright. Yeah, just putting on a little bit of this colour coming in here. And down in here, a lot darker, so a lot less paint. Now then, if you want to, you feel the big blade is a little too cumbersome, you can always pick up the short edge and just add some of that across. Don't forget, get right to the very edge of the bark. Again, this is something that I used to do sometimes, is I'd miss the edge of my tree all the way down. My poor old birch trees looked a little bit sort of odd. So get right to the edge of the tree, touch the sky in the background if needs be. This is coming together rather nice, isn't it? It looks like a really lovely old birch tree. And so I'll come back and add a little touch of dark here and there. I've just been watching another artist, and if you ever get a chance to look, I'll give him a shout out. A guy called Richard Musgrove Evans, Australian chap, wears a bush hat. He paints a whopping great canvases and he loves palette knives, and he paints with a palette knife this big, and it's like a great big blade on that, and he whaps the paint on, and he does paintings which are just so amazingly gorgeous. He just lashes around, and I watch him and I feel inspired. I want to pick up a big palette knife and have a real rip into this one, but I'm going to control it, folks, don't worry. I think it's time now to put on maybe just a few branches on here, just to give this a little bit more sort of size. So I'm going to get my liner brush back and see if we can add some nice crinky branches. I'll do it with some time lapse. I'm just using my liner brush, a few drops of linseed oil into some of my black and brown colour, and I take my time with this. I don't just go madly at it. I stand back, add a few little branches, stand back and add a few more. If you're not sure about painting branches, then look at some nice reference photographs. If you sort of take notice of how branches sort of grow from the main part of a tree, you'll do a much nicer job. Trying to paint those pitchforks and those funny looking V shapes. Just add a few, stand back, add a few snapped off and broken ones here and there, and see if you can make a really good job of painting your own silver birch trees. Wow, that turned out lovely, didn't it? These lovely chunky bits of old branches and things. And time for a sparkle or two. So I'm going to take my palette knife and I'm going to go into some of my super bright yellows, touches of white. Think about zinging across there, maybe just catching the edge of this silver birch tree. Just catch that edge. Just pop a little bit of sparkle on there, maybe on the side of a branch or two. And this is the reason why I went for this lovely sort of blue-grey colour for my tree, so that I could add in a few of these little pops of light. Put in just a suggestion here and there, a little bit of snow, and I'll use my brush just to put in a few little dabs of snow, and then I think maybe just a few more touches down here at the base. But essentially I think my painting is done. No, I didn't like that. Let's move that. But yeah, my painting is done, and I can play with it backwards and forwards now, get my tree to look exactly the way I want it to. And I hope you've enjoyed watching me paint this lovely birch tree. So, a quick finish off for you. Well, as you might have guessed, I really got carried away with this stage by painting. I absolutely love painting these big trees, and little touches of snow and delicate highlights, little sparkles and pops of colour. Well, it was just so much fun.
but I have to finish the painting for you.
Well, at last a finished painting, but I could have sat here and painted this for, well, more hours than I care to think. But I hope this has inspired you to maybe have a look at doing some AI art for inspiration. And if you've enjoyed watching this, maybe you'll be inspired to watch some more of my videos. So don't move, they're coming right along. Happy painting, people. Where did I put my brushes?